Alright, so this video is going to cover how you're able to work together as teams without physically being in the same room or being hardwired. You can actually work together anywhere that both of you have internet access. So, you may have discovered that there's been some new material posted to assignment 4. The first one is the Linux Mint template. That has to do with, so some people are using or reusing the info 6003 VM. We've cloned it, so it doesn't interfere with the course. However, it's completely agnostic. This particular lab is not specific to any particular vendor, whether it be Ubuntu, Red Hat, Linux Mint. It works with all of them. The commands I do have are specific to Debian. However, with just a few searches, you can easily switch between that and Red Hat. The other file that exists is this private key right here. You may have heard that we never give the private key to anyone. We guard that very closely, and that we give out only the public key. So it may be quite unusual that I've given you the private key to some server. So that server is basically the middleman that is going to allow us to connect to each other's VMs. I've provided you with a private key due to the fact that if I gave you the password of the server, well, that wouldn't be much of a challenge, and I wouldn't be having you practice PKI. So you're going to be installing this private key to connect to this server. So first, we're going to connect with the VM. It does come with a default of 16 gig. That's because I did have it for some other purpose. We definitely do not need 16 gigs. So we're going to throttle that down. You could probably throttle it to probably somewhere around there. A gig or less is certainly sufficient. I will also show, once it's fully loaded, how you can tell what the memory that it's using. We just don't want it to do any swapping. But for the purposes that we'll be using, that is more than enough. Potentially when you start tripwire, you may want a bit more. Again, from the IDS perspective, prior to IDS, 1 core is probably more than enough. 2, potentially again, when using tripwire. So the login, just simply Windows 1. Again, as seen here, Windows 1. Once it's fully loaded, you can just pull up the system monitor, and you can see that the RAM we gave it is more than sufficient. When it would become insufficient is if we were launching browsers such as Firefox or using any kind of utilities. So it is actually doing a bit of swapping. Do watch that, but ultimately for what we're doing, I couldn't see it go any higher. So because not everybody has a full GUI, the rest of this demonstration will actually be switching to the console. So on the keyboard, if you press and hold Control and Alt and hit F2, that'll bring you to a console page. It's not mandatory that you also switch to a console. I just want to prove that you are at no disadvantage by having or not having the GUI. So the login was Wharf and Windows 1. So we are going to be using SSH, so we first want to verify that we actually have SSH, so you'll see that we don't. So all we have to do is just install it. Try to type your password properly. And then verify that you do in fact have SSH. Again, I'm pretty sure I spelled it wrong. And we're connected. So the next order of business is we need that file, which is the private key. So on FOL, it is a zip file, and it had to be a zip file because FOL does not allow you to upload files without file extensions. So if you launch the zip, you'll see it's just that. And it's protected. The password is info6001. And if you launch it with a text editor, you'll get a bit more detail as to what it is. So in the Options tab, you want to share out that folder. So I'm going to remove root. I'm going to add keys. And that's the directory. So the leaf point, so I'm actually just going to go to mount to show you. It's HGFS. And we only have one share. It's called keys, and that's them. So next we want to make certain that the SSH directory exists in our home directory, which is the tilde. Tilde stands for our home directory. And it states that it already exists. So I'm actually going to remove it. I swore I reverted to snapshot prior to this video. So I'm going to remove it. It's gone. So, make directory. There. And now you want to copy that private key to that directory. And we will now change directory into there. And what's fairly important is you want to see that only root has access to that file and nobody else does. So we should now successfully be able to use that file. I'm going to get cd to return back to our home directory, and we're going to test that that actually works. So the username is info6001, and then the host name is info6001 again, .wikisteve.com. And the file is protected. It's protected with the info6001 is the passphrase for the key. And then what's important on this page is we need this page first before we proceed. So don't do any port forwarding until you first logged in and verified available ports. So ports that we cannot use. Obviously port 22, because, well, we're connected to port 22, and the server requires that. There's also port 53 that's bound, and that's it. So the sky's the limit for any other ports that you wish to use. This server is also enabled via IPv4 and IPv6, as you can see on the screen. Also, we want to keep this page open, so we can actually do that. If you're familiar with tmux, you could do that on your local computer, or on your keyboard, press and hold Alt and use the arrow keys. So I'm going to use the one to my right, which switches to another sudo terminal, and I'm just going to log in again. And again, I typed the wrong password. There, we're good. So if you look here, I'd like to use 8080 as the local port. 8080 is not listed there. So I'm just going to now do SSH, and we want for redirect, which is a capital R, and port 8080, which is the port that it's going to appear on the server as a local address, and that local address is going to bind to our SSH port. And then we want the username and the host name. Alright, so what's important is now, once we've launched this, we can actually see that port 8080 is now in use. We actually have still 2 instances of it, so on this one was just the one we were reviewing prior to setting it. So if we hit spacebar, hit enter, we'll actually see the new port. I'm going to switch to the other one. So this is the one that we actually need to keep open for sure. If you were to quit out of here, it would nuke your connection. So you would then tell your partner, you can connect to my computer on port 8080. So your partner would then go to PuTTY, enter your port number, 8080, and they put in the host name. We've never connected to this computer before, so we're going to add the fingerprint. The login to that VM was Wharf and Windows 1. So we type in who. You should see now that it is connected to the loopback, which would make the most sense since we've done a redirection to that particular computer. And that allows you now to connect from anywhere you have an internet connection. So your VM, in this instance, is just simply set to NAT. There is absolutely nothing special. All it requires is just an internet connection, and that is it. So this applies to both the in-class and the online. Online, I would most definitely, now that you have a very easy access to working collaboratively to communicate with any other online students. If they're not responding though, do send out a couple other messages to some of the in-class and say, hey, I would be interested in working together. Would you also like to work together as well? You could do this lab alone. It's not as fun to do it alone, so I would highly suggest working collaboratively with this lab. Alright, I hope everyone enjoys the lab. Let me know if you have any questions.